Okay, Julie, thank you.
Thanks, Firkins. And it's so good to see everybody coming on. Many people friends that I know from different places in my Jewish life. And I saw somebody put in from Woodland Hills. It's California, where I grew up, and people from Newton, Massachusetts, where I lived and went to school, and here in Pittsburgh. So it's great to see people and connect with people that I know and have a connection with, and then those of you who I don't and will still have yet to have a connection with. It's not insignificant that we have all taken the time, set aside this time, and done all the things that we need to do to be here now. So, welcome. I'm so glad to be here with you. I've got a pretty short teaching so that we'll have time to sit that I'd like to share with you. And I'll start just two screens. I've got two slides that I'll just share this text with you. And I'm starting with this text from a book by Rabbi Art Green, Kabbalah for Tomorrow. And I just love this text. The world is not an entity separate from God, but a cloak that both hides and reveals God's presence. Let's just sit with that for a second. That all by itself. So often we separate. It's what our human mind does, is it categorizes and puts things in boxes, and that is very useful if you've ever had a messy desk or anything that you need to organize. And yet sometimes the mind mistakenly separates things that are actually connected. So let's go back to this one sentence to start. The world is not an entity that is separate from God, but a cloak. The world is a cloak that both hides and reveals God's presence. Through that cloak, in all its infinite varieties, we can gain a glimpse of the One, the Holy One within. He unpacks it a little bit more here and says that knowing and loving the universe, whether through understanding the minute organisms studied by the microbiologist or the vast spaces traversed by the mind of the astronomer, is part of our way to knowing and loving God. So I'll just take that down for a second. Zooming in on the small stuff, backing up for the larger picture, both of those are our ways of understanding and loving God. And we do it through knowing the world. So I've been sitting with this recently, and it's just been very meaningful for me and helpful for me. And I hope it is for you. And in terms of my mindfulness practice, it's the idea of coming to my senses. When my mind is busy doing its categorizing, or it also does this thing which we called being discursive. In other words, the mind goes from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing, and all of a sudden you don't know how you got there. It's just doing what a mind does. But to notice that what I can do with this mind and with all my senses is to begin to understand that this world is not separate from God, but that cloak that both hides and reveals. And so I can tap into my senses as a way of revealing God in this moment, revealing the divine in this moment, revealing my connection to what is divine in this moment through sight, through sound, through touch, taste, scent, and including our thoughts that are thoughts as a phenomenon themselves. And it is through paying attention to our senses that we engage in the world and catch a glimpse of the one within. So that was that one text, and I have one more short text. These are short texts with big ideas. So go to this text from Proverbs. This is Proverbs 3, verse 6. Bechol drachecha da'ehu, vehu yasher orchotecha. And the JPS translates it as, in all your ways acknowledge him, God, and he will make your paths smooth. I like an alternative translation. So instead of using he and him, and instead of saying God, I think it's just a great thing for us to expand our God language in as many ways that make it feel real for you. And for me, I've used this translation of God as reality that I learned from Rabbi Rami Shapiro. Maybe some of you have experienced this, but the idea of God as reality. And to me, that goes back to this idea that the world is not an entity separate from God, but a cloak that both hides and reveals God's presence. This is the reality. So through all your ways, know reality. And reality will make your paths straight. This word, yasher, can also be taken, this verb can also mean to level things out, meaning you can walk on your paths without obstruction. So I like to think of that also as a little bit of equanimity, that things are level, that they are balanced, which allows you to walk without obstruction. So these two thoughts, one verse and one thought, I like to bring to our meditation practice this idea that we really tap deeply into our senses. What do we do when we sit? We can tap into the senses. We start by focusing on the thoughts by using an anchor of attention, often the breath. But of course, if the breath is not useful for you to use as an anchor of attention for all kinds of reasons, we have lots of other anchors. We can use that feeling of the feet on the ground, or your hands, maybe put your hands on a table, and just feeling that pressure, or the feeling of air on your skin, or you can use sound. But we use all of our senses and maybe focus on one as we sit, so that we can be really present with our moment-to-moment experience. So let's go ahead and find your seat and set aside anything that is going to be distracting. Feel your feet on the floor, and maybe even adjust your posture just a little bit, maybe move back and forth a little bit until you can find a posture world just being a cloak that both hides and reveals God's presence. So go ahead and allow your thoughts to gather towards the breath or whatever you're using as your anchor for attention. Here's the inhale and the exhale. And the transition from one to the other. Allow your thoughts to drop into the body, into the senses. You can begin with a quick body scan if you like. Just notice if there's any physical sensations that come to your awareness as you move from the top of the head to all the muscles of the face, to the back of the head, the neck, the shoulders, the arms, the forearms, the hands. The back body, the scapula, the spine, the low back. The front body, the collarbones, the heart space, the abdomen. Feel the effect of gravity on the hips, the thighs, knees, shins, calves. The feet, the toes. The body as a whole, from the tip of the toes to the top of the head. And begin to let the body be the tool for knowing the world. Let the body do the knowing. Let the body do the meditating. And if you like, you can stay with that awareness of the whole body doing the knowing. Or you can bring your focus in a little more tightly just to the breath. To the inhale and the exhale. To the whole process of breathing as if it is the most interesting thing. B'chol drachecha da'ehu. Through all your ways, know reality. V'hu yasher orchotecha. And reality will make your path straight. This is what it's like to be sitting here, alive in this body, in this moment, while the body breathes all by itself. Hineni, here I am. Hineni, 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 hineni.
Julie, thank you so much. It was really a beautiful teaching and personally speaking, much needed, but just really very powerful. So we continue our practice now with the recitation of Kaddish for those among us who are mourning. I invite everyone to stay for Kaddish, and those who are mourning to put the names of your loved ones in the chat. And then I invite everyone, please, to stand in body or in spirit, to unmute yourselves so that we can recite the Kaddish together. And we begin. Yit Gadal,
Oseh shalom limamav, oseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
thank you so much, everyone, for being here today, for joining in this sit, for being part of this wonderful gathering, for joining in Kaddish. I invite people to stay, if you would wish, for about 10 or 15 minutes to ask Julie questions. Or if you need to leave, we will see you, I hope, tomorrow. Same place, same station. So be well. And those who can stay, if you have questions that you would like to ask of Julie about her meditation, I see a question from Jan. If you can type it in the box, in the chat, rather, that would be best, to put your questions in the chat. There was a question, Julie, just while people are putting their questions in. Someone asked, what does Hineni mean? So
Here I am.
For those who don't know, and sort of the larger meaning of Hineni.
The larger, there's the here I am and the, oh, here I am. In all its context, where am I? And just like that phrase that the Proverbs, know God in all your ways. All your ways to me is like the Hineni, like here I am in my life, all the roles I take in my life, all the history that I bring to my life, my own history, my ancestors' history. Like, where do I locate myself in time, in space, in tradition, in my emotional life, my inner life, and the outer life? It's all of it. So many layers. And we tend to pay attention to one or two layers at a time, except when we sit. When we sit, we give ourselves that opportunity to hold more. It's like, okay, yes, I'm here at my desk. Oh, but wait a minute. And with 120 of my friends and paying attention to the inner world too. So that's a short answer.
Okay. And well, here's just a follow-up question. There's some really good questions, but this is a follow-up in Hineni. I've typically thought of Hineni as I am here for you, as in when Abraham and Moses respond to God and say Hineni, like
Right. Right.
I've always thought like I'm all in. Tell me what to do here. Can you talk about Hineni as being here for ourselves, for our own well-being?
It's both. It is that yes and. It is yes and. The underlying understanding is that we are always connected. So when I am taking care of myself, I am taking care of a being in the world. When I'm taking care of others, I'm taking care of beings in the world. And oh, right, we are all B'Tselem Elohim. So in a way, we are taking care of God too. It's that idea. The reason I put those two things together, the Hineni and the B'chol drachecha da'ehu, in all your ways, acknowledge or know reality, know God. Both the microscope and the telescope, from both of those viewpoints. So neither ignoring yourself, but wait, there's a Jewish saying here. It's a little Pirkei Avot here. If I am for my only for myself, who am I? And that's true. That it is not the reality that I'm trying to lift the lid on with this sit, with this, and that this one verse helps lift the lid on, so to speak, for me, is that we are connected. We are connected to everything in the universe, even though our minds are really good at compartmentalizing and separating. And that is a great skill of the human mind, to be able to categorize, and it's really necessary. But we don't want to do it so much that we believe it in every instance, that we lose this very foundational idea that, wait a minute, we are all connected. Us humans, we are connected with this world, with all living creatures, with all inert creatures. We're all made of the same stuff. And so it's that basic fundamental connection that is great to know sometimes, but when I'm driving a car, I have to treat myself like a separate entity. And so it's both and.
Yes. If you want to get where you're going, yes.
Yeah, right. Right.
So this is a good question. It goes back to the opening metaphor you used, that was Rabbi Green's, about the world as a cloak. The question is, I'm wondering, from Lester, I'm wondering how a cloak can reveal. More obscuring, but how does a cloak reveal God? Can you speak?
Are you old enough to remember the Invisible Man?
Yes, I am.
The idea that the Invisible Man you couldn't see it was invisible. He was invisible until he had a cloak on, until he had a coat on, and you could see the shape of the thing you can't see. So in that way, that is the way that a cloak can reveal, as well as conceal. If a green screen does the same thing. Green screen hides a thing that is right in. I don't know if you know when you stand in front of a green screen and take a picture of somebody, you can like cover up stuff that you can't normally cover up. It hides what's right in front of you. It's like camouflage. So a cloak can actually show the physical presence of something that might be camouflaged by light, by a trick of the light, or something else that's obscuring it. I hope that's helpful.
So a number of people ask questions along these lines. I'm just going to pull Gail's out. Reality, as we all know, is, that was my editorializing, but reality is difficult right now. Can you say a little bit more about using the word reality for the name of God when reality is so hard?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is when we so for me, meditation practice is my work in order to for me to be able to be with what is, just as it is. So much of my suffering is caught up with me wanting more of something, wanting to push something away, or just like, I'm not looking, it's not there. And I sit in order to increase my capacity to be with what is as it is, and then make wise decisions about what to do about it. When reality is tough, when our lives are tough and we try to just cut it out, the truth is we don't cut it out. We do something else instead. And if when we play with the idea of God just being one thing, like if God is only the good and what I like, I feel like I am engaging in a practice of trying to create God. I'm making God, and I'm making God smaller.
Mm, mm,
I'm making God smaller. And God is all of it, all of it, even the difficult stuff. Doesn't mean I have to like it or understand it. Certainly doesn't mean I understand it. But just to know that it is all God.
mm. Tish said something, as Tish often does, that a really great quote. She said along these ideas, I love the idea of reality being a metaphor for God. As much as I would like reality to always be positive, I need to see that God is in all of reality. So that's really just exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is reality no more, this is from Noah, is reality no more than being present and accepting the moment?
You know what? I think so, but your mileage may vary. This is an experiential practice. I am not the authority on that, and nobody is. And we sit, so we test that over and over and over. What is true in my experience? And to notice that some of the hindrances that keep us sort of wrapped up in suffering. The Buddhists are really good at lists, and they have the list of the 5 hindrances. And I'm hearing that in that question, that the hindrance is certainly one that I sit with a lot, and that is doubt. So the 5 hindrances are, let's see if I can get them all. Craving for sensual desire, anger, flurry and worry, which is sort of a restlessness, sloth and torpor, the tendency to want to just kind of go to sleep to it all, and then finally doubt, which makes you question: Am I doing it right? Am I doing? Is this right? Is anything right? And so these are the hindrances which sort of get in the way of seeing what is true, what's actually true in the moment. And we sit, and these hindrances, it's a long-term practice of noticing how they operate in you. Because your favorite hindrances may be different than my favorite hindrances. Or the ones that show up for me the most. They're not really my favorite, but they show up for me just because of who I am. And to notice when they show up. And then, like if I'm sitting and that question came up, is this just doubt? Get with it over and over again and begin to catch on to my own habits. When sitting becomes a little difficult, or when reality becomes a little difficult, I get this sort of doubting or maybe even cynical voice shows up to kind of tell me, don't look at that, don't pay attention to that anymore. So I hope that's helpful.
It's really helpful. There's some wonderful comments in here. Here's one from Marilee. Pain or unpleasantness is inevitable. Suffering is optional.
Optional, yes.
And
yeah.
that's one of my mantras as a mom.
Right, right.
And I hope over time it's absorbed. This was a really rich, in some ways, a simple teaching today, Julie, but so rich. I have to say, I really appreciated the way you brought us back to our bodies and reminded us to let our bodies know God, know reality. We are so often trapped in our heads, and lots of energy up here.
And that's fine. That's fine that there's energy. That is how our brains have evolved, and they do really good work. They're able to categorize things, but they will just pop up with thoughts. And when we begin to understand, not just that somebody told you, but like you recognize it in yourself, it's like, oh, there's just a thought that just popped into my head. I don't have to believe it. It may not be true. It might be true. It might be really good information. It may not be true. This is why I sit, to start to see the habits of my own thinking and how they operate in me. How they operate to cut me off when I feel fear. And how if I just notice it and like, oh, there's me being afraid again, or being anxious, or being nervous, or whatever. And I know it's okay. It's like, okay, take another breath and make the wise choice. Make the wise choice to the best of our ability.
All right, there's more and more, but it is time for us to go. So we will continue this conversation. We will continue it. Julie, come back. It was a wonderful set, a rich teaching, I think, that's provoked a lot of good stuff for all of us.
I'm glad. I've been sitting with this for a long time. It's good.
Well, I'm downloading the Arthur Green quote. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day, and we will see you tomorrow.